Okay, so our first speaker tonight is JN. You can see him over there, desperately getting ready to go. I've known JN for a while. We spent some really nice quality time in California together at the Strata conference. Bit of context about the talk. So JN was an early employee at PasswordBox, way before they were acquired, and a key piece of building up their data team. So he's going to talk about that tonight and some of the lessons learned, and I will hand it off to him. Let's welcome JN.
All right. Thank you, Vaughn, for the introduction. Montreal Data is getting serious with the microphones and the clicker and everything, so it's super. And we're live streaming. Look at that. So I'm super excited to be here today. So basically today what I want to talk about is my learnings throughout the 4 last years working at PasswordBox and then transitioning to Intel. So I'm going to talk about the stuff I wish I had known 4 years ago when we were just starting out the data team. I'm going to talk about building a data culture, and I'm going to talk about very concrete tactics that we used and that you might be able to use at your company. All right, so 4 years timeline, the graph you're seeing there is the number of events processed throughout that time. It's one of the biggest vanity metric. So let's start. Clicker is a bit weird. All right, this way, okay. Okay, so as I said, January 2013, I joined PasswordBox, early employee. At the time, I was managing user acquisition, so driving the paid campaigns. June 2013, we launched our product. So for the people who don't know about PasswordBox, we are a multi-platform password manager. You can install it on Android, iOS, and your desktop computer. Fast forward a year and a half later, we scaled the team. We're about 60 employees. We have millions of users, and then Intel acquires us. So that was a really nice validation. Intel decided to invest in Montreal, invest in the project. A few months later, as the data team, we decided to review how we do things. We decided to invest in Amazon Redshift, Looker, use those tools internally. So we upgraded our setup. And right now we're processing about 1 billion records per month. We're a team of 105 employees in the Safe Identity division. And we are 4 in the data team working full-time on this. So this is the team. We have a list of tools that we use just for your info. Looker, Amazon Redshift, Mixpanel, Python notebooks, Go language. And that's basically it. And the team is composed of 4 data scientists. We are cross-functional, so we can do the code, do some engineering work, but also do the analysis. This is a very simple organigram of the company. So we have the product teams on one side, so iOS, Android, I named them in the past. And on the other side, we have the data team. So there's no full-time data analyst or data scientist in each one of the product team. We are a separate team. We're acting a bit like a SWAT. So we go per project, and we're going to go help the other teams when they need it. So today I'm going to talk about 3 main themes where my learnings came from. So the first one is empowering people. The second one is delivering value. And the third one is garbage in, garbage out. All right, empowering people. So as I said, we're a team of 105 employees, and we're just 4 in the data team, and we wanted to have a big impact. When you're such a small team in a big company, the way we thought of the process was, okay, let's leverage the fact that we're so many people and treat everyone as a potential data analyst. So treat everyone like they could use some data, they could ask some question and answer themselves that question. So there's really two topics that I want to talk about in that subject: tools and people, and sharing and communicating. In regards to tools, no matter what tools you use, tools are just tools. You can use Tableau, Looker, you can have some fancy machine learning algorithm doing some great computation, but if people are not using those tools to take action, they are pretty much worthless. And your job as the data team or as someone in the data team is to be a guide, not a gatekeeper. So you want to help people use those tools, know how to ask a good question, but you don't want to be the one giving the data and processing everything. And that's why we invested a lot in self-service. So the tools we chose to use are really focused on having the whole team, 105 employees, someone working on accounting, being able to go in a software, in a tool, and get the data they want to get. So what worked for us very well is doing metrics office hours. And I've seen the people at Spotify talk also about doing some metrics office hours. So basically, every week, every day, we have an hour slot where people can come and ask us questions about how to get access to data, how to use the tools. They can just bring their laptop and sit down with us, and we're going to help them answer that question. So it's really good one-to-one time to coach the people. And in regards to coaching the people, it's really great when you have like power users, so people that are really engaged and really want to get their question answered. In regards to sharing and communicating, it's really important to share all of your data analysis. So you want to make sure that if you dig on a bug, dig on a problem in the software, you want to share the data, and you want to share what you found out, even if there's no major insights. You also want to make sure that the insights that you find translate into actions. So if you find, like, for example, a metric where people do specific actions in the product, for example, we found, or one metric that matter, where a portion of the people that do specific action in the product are very likely to be retained, then you want to make sure that there are actions, there are stories, there are basically work that's going to be translated from those insights. And then you want to communicate often. So you don't want to be a data team separate in your own little corner doing some data crunching and not share any data analysis. So you want to share a lot of data. So for us, every Wednesday, since the beginning of PasswordBox, we add some team lunch. So everybody gets in the cafeteria, we order some Romato's chicken, and the data team presents some of the findings they found. Other teams also present some of their stuff. So that was really a great way to communicate the data, communicate the insights, and afterwards it always leads to good discussions with your teammates. We also have an internal newsletter. We have a internal blog. So that's really good ways of sharing and communicating across the company. Second team, delivering value. Just gonna. So as a small team, you want to be focused on shipping value. You don't have a lot of time to waste. We're four people, so we didn't have a lot of leeway to go into 2 years projects. So in that regards, there was really two tactics that we found: building versus buying, and shipping often. So I recommend that you always consider building versus buying. And what I mean by that is, if you consider a project, always consider the existing products that will do the job for you, and always consider building it yourself. So if you're building it yourself, it's because you want more control and flexibility. So you want to be able to tweak everything, have a lot of control, and do the things in very specific ways. If you decide to buy, it's a lot cheaper in time and resources. And most of the time, it's going to be cheaper in money as well, because the cost of maintaining a project is pretty high. So when we started out, I remember we started building a dashboard from scratch. So we started a brand new project, Polymer, Golang in the backend. And we were super excited to build that brand new dashboards. And a few weeks in the project, we were spending hours and hours tweaking charts. And at one point, we just took a step back and said, okay, we're spending all of this time building a tool, but we're not investing in doing some data analysis right now. We're just investing time in building the actual tool. So we decided to switch to Looker. For those of you who don't know, Looker is a BI tool that is really completely changing the way people analyze data. It's super powerful. And when we found it out, we basically switched to Looker, and we're not even looking back. This was one of the best decisions we've made. Shipping often. So if you're part of a data team at a startup, you're going to know what I'm talking about. There's always a dilemma about investing in engineering time to build the infrastructure to have to do better work versus doing analysis that can bring a lot of value in the short term. For example, that might be like investing time to build a data warehouse, whereas the opposite, you could be investing in really understanding your paid acquisition campaigns and crunching some numbers that can have a direct impact tomorrow or even today on the runway. So there's always this dilemma of, should we invest in engineering time, or should we do that analysis right now that can give us value right now? So in that regards, one of the solutions we found was that shipping often by very small increments, whether it's engineering or whether it's analysis, was really powerful. And the reason why it was so powerful, it's because you get a lot of feedback rapidly. So if you're doing an analysis and it's not providing value to the business, you will know pretty soon. Same for the engineering efforts. So that will guide a bit the way you prioritize your work. As an example, Asana first data warehouse was MySQL. It wasn't one of those big fancy Hadoop warehouse, Redshift warehouse. It was just a MySQL database with some data in it. Eventually, they transitioned to a state-of-the-art data architecture. But they started out simple, they started out small, and they iterated. Third and final point, garbage in, garbage out. Everybody I talked to that worked in data have the same problem. Data is not of high quality. Whether you're doing tracking, whether you're dealing with tracking data, survey data, user inputs, data is always super messy, and it's super hard to deal with that kind of data. So we found 3 ways of coping with that challenge: documenting your data, testing your data, and controlling and owning the data. So documenting the data. And I know that title, it's not super exciting to see, document your data. Oh, nice. That's but it's so important because you want people to be able to know what's tracked, what are the action, what are the attributes that you track in your application. So you want a central place where all of the action and attributes are documented. So you can start with an Excel spreadsheet where you document and list all of the action and attributes that you track. Teams should have access to the documentation as well. So as you saw, like in the graph, the data team is apart from the product teams. The product teams, in our case, are doing the implementation. So they are specifying where the events are triggered. So you want the documentation to be accessible to them so they know where to implement the data. You want product managers, product owners to know exactly where to look for those data points. And finally, you want it to be machine readable. So we started out with an Excel spreadsheet of attributes and actions that we track in the product. All right. First time with a clicker, so. Okay, so we started with an Excel document, and we transitioned to YAML and JSON. So every events, every actions and attributes were tracked in separate files. So eventually what we built on top of that documentation was build the whole database schema on top of the YAML folders, build some testing tools on top of the YAML folders, and eventually you can have all of your tools querying that same source of information, which is the central repository for your data documentation. So in regards to testing your data, it's super important to implement a quality process super early on. I remember at PasswordBox, we were 10 employees, and before releasing on Friday afternoon, we always had someone checking the data. We had a checklist of things we wanted to validate, because it happens sometime that you release a new version of the product, the tracking is not correct, and you're a bit screwed for a few weeks. You want to take decisions on usage, and you cannot. You want to automate the testing. So at first, at PasswordBox, everything was manual. We have a team of about, right now, maybe 12 people doing manual testing, and a lot of it is automated now. So automated testing for browser extension, iOS app, Android app. It may sound simple, but that's quite an investment to do. And finally, less data, but better quality. There's a saying that storage is cheap, so you should always track everything in your product. I don't really agree with that, because the overhead of dealing with a lot of garbage data is sometimes not worth, it's not worth it. So start with some small, don't track that much, and build on solid foundations instead of trying to track everything. So I talked a bit about the tools. We have some automated testing at PasswordBox before every release goes out. We have some automation that does some action in the product and looks at the events that are triggered, and it makes sure that the events that are triggered is what we expect. So we're not only testing the tracking part of it, but we're also testing the reporting. So what goes in the people managing campaigns ends. So we have tools internally that will test the big queries we do and the big pipeline that through the data. Finally, control and ownership. You want to have access to raw data. So we started out with Mixpanel. Mixpanel is a fairly simple tool where you can send all of your tracking data, all of the actions that people do in the product, they can be sent there, and then you can analyze, do funnels, and do aggregation of the data. So we started with Mixpanel, but eventually we had a lot more complex questions to answer. And pretty soon we needed the raw access to raw data. So I recommend that you always have a way to get access to raw data. I know Google Analytics is super limited in that sense. to easily start and stop sending tracking events to new destinations. So for example, all of the events that are tracked in our product goes through an internal proxy, and that's a proxy that we own, and then we can decide where we want to send the data. So at first, all of the data went through Mixpanel. Eventually, we were able to open up some new destination, build some real-time profiles for marketing automation, open up a new data warehouse in Redshift, and all of this without any changes in the client products. So that's really interesting. There are some tools that do this, segment.io. That's a really interesting tool if you don't want to build it yourself. So as I said, the proxy, building the proxy was really a good solution for us. So finally, key takeaways. It really worked. We invested a lot in self-service. That worked out well for us. It's not done yet. There's a lot of people that we need to coach, train, so they can go get their data. But it's a start. Delivering value. Don't build a dashboard from scratch. We've done the mistake. Other people done the mistake too. Buffer. They wrote a detailed blog post on why they stopped building their own dashboard and switched to another solution. And finally, garbage in, garbage out. Invest in data quality. Our experience is really for tracking data, but no matter what type of data you're dealing with, invest in it. And then I created a small reading list. I referenced a lot of the posts that I talked through my presentation, and a few shameless plugs to my blog where I wrote some posts that inspired this talk. All right, thank you.